Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Fi Mastery Podcast, where our focus is on providing tools, resources, and insights that empower driven individuals to secure their own path to financial independence. My name is Peter Donisanu, and today we're going to talk about whether borrowing money could be a force for good as it relates to your financial plan. Now, you know, a lot has been said about the pitfalls of borrowing money and going into debt. The truth is, however, that credit, when used prudently, can be a force multiplier, act as a lever for building wealth, and help you stay solvent when times get tough. That's why in today's episode, we'll discuss what you can do to give your credit purpose in the context of your broader financial plan and identify ideal borrowing levels to help you stay out of trouble. We'll also discuss the costs of poor debt management, including missed opportunities and how overextending yourself can make you financially fragile. Overall, the big takeaway today is that by adopting a balanced approach to managing your credit, you could be well on your way to crafting a stable, prosperous future, one in which you're moving one step closer to mastering your own path to financial independence. So with that, let's dive into today's podcast. Is credit a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it all depends on your perspective. When used correctly, credit can supercharge your life and help you level up financially in shorter time than you would if you relied on savings alone. That's why Dale Carnegie, in his book, The Gospel of Wealth, wrote that debt can be a powerful force for good if used productively. Now, the trouble with debt is that, like any other financial tool out there, it has been used by lenders and borrowers alike, leading to its largely being villainized by society. Now, make no mistake, in the wrong applications, debt can be a form of bondage. That's why in some cultures, its use is forbidden and why some individuals have mortgage payoff parties instead of retirement savings celebrations. Now, certainly, when used prudently, credit can boost your earnings ability, enable you to acquire appreciable or income-producing assets, and help keep you from going broke when life throws you a curveball bigger than your savings account. Even so, Scottish historian and author Niall Ferguson wrote that credit is like a looking glass. Once cracked, it can never be the same again, and the more we use it, the more fragile it becomes. Indeed, these perspectives from Carnegie and Ferguson show how, on the one hand, the wise use of credit can dramatically enhance your current financial situation, and on the other hand, debt can leave your finances in a precarious position when not managed properly. Certainly, much has been written about the trouble with credit and how much too much debt can put you into a trap. But before we discuss the drawbacks of credit, let's take a look at why you would want to use debt to lever up your current financial situation. Now, when used the right way, credit can be a force multiplier. It can help you accomplish things in your life that you otherwise may not have been able to do on your own financially. Now, the term force multiplier is often used by the military to describe a factor such as positioning or equipment that can increase a unit's combat potential, allowing it to fight on par with a more significant fighting force. For example, in World War II, the development and use of radar technology arguably changed the course of the war in favor of the Allies. Now, as you'll recall, radar is a detection system that uses radio waves to determine the location, speed, and direction of various objects. Now, radar served as a force multiplier for the Allies by providing them with a significant advantage in air and naval combat. In fact, with radar, the Allies could detect incoming enemy aircraft and ships at a much greater distance than the enemy could detect them. And this tool allowed the Allies to prepare their defenses and launch counterattacks more efficiently and accurately. For instance, radar played a critical role in the Battle of Britain, in which the Royal Air Force used radar to detect incoming German aircraft and direct its own fighters to intercept them. That's because using radar allowed the RAF to defend against the German bombing campaign more effectively and played a crucial role in their eventual victory. So from this perspective, credit can act as a force multiplier by taking the financial resources you have today and amplifying them to achieve a broader victory in your life. So how exactly can we accomplish this goal? Well, the first way that it can benefit you is by enhancing your future earnings ability by allowing you to borrow money in the present so that you can improve your skills and get credentials you need so you can break into a new field or raise your earnings ability to a higher level in your current role. And now, while the topic of college education, and more specifically college debt, is hotly debated today, statistics still argue in favor of a college degree. That's because, according to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics' most recent Occupational Outlook Handbook, the data show that those jobs with the fastest industry growth rates and median pay of at least $100,000 all require a college degree. Indeed, according to the same government data, there's a growing earnings gap between individuals holding a college degree and those who don't. For example, government data show that the average 25-year-old full-time worker with a bachelor's degree made a median annual wage of around $55,000 compared with $30,000 for full-time workers of the same age group with just a high school diploma. And when we look at the earnings gap over a lifetime, it increases substantially. Here again, a study from the Department of Education shows that an individual with a high school diploma is likely to earn a median income of $1.9 million over their lifetime. However, an individual with a bachelor's degree could earn $3.4 million over their lifetime, while a top earning professional degree could bring in nearly $6.5 million. So then, even if we assume that it costs an individual $160,000 to obtain and pay off their debt over 10 years, the cost associated with college debt would still net an extra $1.3 million, or a multiple of 8 times of what a non-college graduate could earn over their lifetime. So from this perspective, we can say that credit can act as a force multiplier to enhance an individual's inherent knowledge and increase their earnings power. Now, another way that credit can dramatically change your financial situation is by giving you leverage to use a little bit of money to create a lot of wealth. Now, for many individuals, purchasing a home is one way to create wealth. And certainly, arguments have been made and continue to be made for and against the wealth-building attributes of home ownership. Even so, long-term benefits become evident once you look past the short-term costs of home ownership versus renting. Now, one way that home ownership builds wealth is through the appreciation of the value of your home over time. That's because history has shown that home values have tended to appreciate over the long term, sometimes resulting in significant wealth gains to homeowners. And while you may only be putting down around 5, 10, or 20% towards the purchase of a home, you gain access to the full value of the appreciated equity in your home over time when you borrow against it or when you actually sell your home. What's more, home ownership can help you build wealth through the process of forced savings. That's because the longer you make mortgage payments, the more principal you pay down, which is essentially putting money into a savings account each month, assuming home values remain stable. And this approach can help you build wealth over time, even if the cost of home ownership is slightly higher in the short term than that of renting. Now, another way that credit can help turn a little bit of money into a lot of money is by starting a business. And the internet is filled with stories of individuals who borrowed money to achieve wildly successful outcomes. And one rags to riches entrepreneur who used debt to start their business is John Paul DeJoria, the co-founder of John Paul Mitchell Systems, the hair care company. Now, DeJoria was raised in a low-income family and faced multiple financial difficulties throughout his life. In fact, in 1980, when he decided to start John Paul Mitchell Systems with his partner, Paul Mitchell, DeJoria was homeless and living in his car. Even so, he borrowed $700 to launch the company and personally went door to door selling his first hair care products. And through perseverance and hard work, DeJoria managed to grow the business into a $1 million empire, making him one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. Now, a final way that credit can be a valuable tool in your financial toolbox is that can help you stay solvent even when you're short on cash. This point is especially salient should you have an unexpected home or auto emergency, an unforeseen medical expense, or suddenly find yourself without a job. Now, make no mistake, when it comes down to it, an emergency fund or a solid cash management strategy is a prudent way to mitigate these sort of financial risks. Even so, a time will come when using credit can help you stay solvent long enough to keep your priorities straight and stay on track to your journey to financial independence. That's because if you're facing an unexpected one-time big-ticket expense, such as a large medical bill or a significant home repair, instead of drawing down on your savings or liquidating your investments, you could use credit to cover the expense to preserve your financial security. Indeed, by using credit responsibly, you can, over time, spread out the cost of a large one-time expense. And why not just use cash savings to pay down the debt? Well, if you draw down on your cash reserves too much, you risk putting yourselves in a position where you're unable to handle uneven cash flow situations from one month to the next, or potentially limit your optionality when other unforeseen expenses come your way, as they inevitably do. What's more, using credit to cover unexpected expenses can also help you achieve financial freedom in the long term. Now, while this may sound counterintuitive, this works because it helps you avoid the need to liquidate your investments or tap into your savings, so you can preserve your wealth and allow your money compound and grow over time. So when it comes down to it, credit can be a force for good when it's used the right way. Indeed, credit can act as a force multiplier when it comes to your earnings ability, and it can serve as a lever to help acquire assets that might help help you build long-term wealth as a means to help buy time and stay solvent so that you can keep yourself fighting in the game. Now, when it comes to the prudent use of wealth, what trips up most individuals is not necessarily gaining access to credit, but needing a clearly defined purpose for how they'll use the credit itself. It's at this point that credit becomes a problem because without a clearly defined purpose for your money, you may end up relying on credit to live someone else's money script, or as Will Rogers put it, spending money you haven't earned to buy things you don't need to impress people you don't like. Indeed, this topic is essential and one we spent time on in a broader discussion about giving your money purpose in past podcast episodes. And that's why you'll likely recall that giving your money purpose means knowing why you work in a chosen profession, how you will feel when you can use your money to make critical life changes, and how you can spend your money without feeling guilty. So what purpose does your money have? Take a moment to consider the values and the purpose that you define for your life. Then think about the near and long-term priorities that you've defined for your life's journey. Now ask yourself, how can I use my credit as a force multiplier or leverage to acquire productive assets or to ensure that I have an adequate last resort backstop? Put differently, if you plan to use credit to amplify your future earnings potential, ask yourself if your chosen profession or your vocation and the credential that you're planning to borrow for is genuinely something that aligns with your values and the purpose that you've defined for your life. If not, then carefully consider whether borrowing for this educational goal is something you might regret if it's not moving you closer to your intended life goal. Now, Tim Kaiser, a psychologist who's written extensively on the psychological consequences of materialism and the pursuit of wealth, emphasizes the importance of aligning one's chosen vocation with their values and their life purpose. And Kaiser argues that people who pursue careers solely for the sake of money and status are more likely to experience adverse psychological outcomes such as anxiety, depression, and a lack of fulfillment. That's why Kaiser suggests that individuals who choose a career that aligns with their values and life purpose are more likely to experience a sense of meaning and purpose in their work. This in turn can lead to greater intrinsic motivation and satisfaction and overall well-being, but more importantly, a genuinely prudent use of their credit. And as it relates to borrowing to acquire an asset like a home or a car, here again the question you want to ask yourself is whether the purchase you make will move you further down the path to financial independence or whether it's simply serving as a means to satisfy somebody else's money script. To be sure, Hornstein Veblen, a prominent economist and social theorist, believed that people often engage in conspicuous consumption or the spending of money on items solely to display wealth and social status in order to signal their social status and impress others. Now, in his book, The Theory of the Leisure Class, Veblen argued that people engage in this behavior as a way of demonstrating their superiority over others in other social circles. So before you go out and borrow to buy a new house or a new car, ask yourself if your motivation is based on moving you closer to your intended life purpose or simply to live someone else's money script. And when it comes to relying on credit as a stopgap for emergencies, remember that cash should be your primary means for addressing one-time big-ticket spending needs. Indeed, an emergency fund can serve as your financial safety net, ensuring that you stay on track with your financial goals and help you avoid setbacks when unforeseen expenses arise. That's because when you have this reserve in place, you're able to cope with unexpected expenses like medical emergencies, car repairs, or job losses without having to dip into your long-term savings or into incurring debt. Either way, if you're looking to borrow to preserve your long-term savings because you have a big-ticket expense, make sure you borrow prudently so that you can stay on track to your goal to financial independence. Either way, giving your money purpose is the first step in getting off the hedonic treadmill of mindlessly borrowing more money simply to chase after outcomes or spend it to impress other people. Now that we've talked about how credit can fast-track your path to financial independence and how aligning its use with your money's purpose can help you make wise borrowing decisions, let's take a moment to discuss why too much credit can be too much of a good thing. Now, it's common sense that we all need to borrow money within reason, and many financial professionals out there argue against accessing credit, but the truth is that you likely know individuals in your own life who've had their own financial plans derailed because of unmitigated borrowing and spending choices. In fact, Susie Orman, a well-known personal finance expert, struggled with debt early in her life, which impeded her ability to achieve her financial goals. That's because Susie grew up in a middle-class family in Chicago, and while there was always an interest in finance in her life, she didn't have the best financial habits. And as a young adult, Susie worked as a waitress and later as a financial advisor, but she was living beyond her means and accumulated too much debt. At one point, she found herself with over $20,000 in credit card debt and owed money to the IRS. And despite making a decent income, Susie struggled to make ends meet and couldn't save for the future. Now, it wasn't until Susie hit rock bottom that she realized that she needed to take control of her finances. That's when she made a plan to pay off her debt, cut back on her spending, and start living for her future. She even took a job as a financial advisor in California to learn more about managing money and building wealth. Now, over time, Susie's financial situation improved and she was eventually able to achieve her financial goals. And despite her early struggles with debt, Susie's experiences taught her valuable lessons about the importance of managing money wisely and avoiding the pitfalls of borrowing too much money. Now, as you think about the possibilities that borrowed money can open up in your life, it's easy to forget that your debt will need to be serviced at one point or another. That's why when you're not paying attention to how much money you're borrowing or who you're borrowing it from, you could find yourself in a position where you're earning an income simply to pay off your creditors. And when you do, it becomes a form of bondage. That's because you could find yourself in a position where a large portion of your income is going towards paying down your debt, leaving you with little money to spend on the things that you want or you need. You could also find yourself needing help to make ends meet, unable to save for the future, or even struggling to pay for unexpected expenses. Additionally, having excess debt can also limit your options and control your life. For example, you may be unable to change jobs or start a business because you need a steady income to service your high debt load. You may also have to put off major milestones like buying a house or starting a family because you simply can't afford it. And the stress and the anxiety that comes with being in debt can also take a toll on your mental and emotional well-being. That's because you may feel trapped and hopeless, constantly worrying about how you'll make ends meet or how you'll even pay off your debts. So when taken all together, servicing too much debt can be a form of bondage because it limits your options and control and ability to live the life that you want. In fact, it can be a constant source of stress and anxiety, leaving you feeling trapped and unable to break free. So with all that said, what's an ideal amount of debt to carry? Well, let's take a look at some ideal borrowing limits for key consumer debt categories like mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, and student loans. Now, when it comes to borrowing to purchase a home, Clark Howard, author of the book Living Large in Lean Times, believes that limiting your monthly mortgage payments to no more than 28% of your gross monthly income is important because it can help you avoid taking on more debt than you can afford to pay back. That's because when you take on too much debt, you risk becoming house rich and cash poor and not having enough money to meet your financial obligations to save for the future. Now, in his book, Clark further explains that your mortgage payments should consider the principal and interest on your loan, as well as property taxes, insurance, and any homeowners association fees. That's why he recommends that you calculate the total cost of owning a home before making a purchase, taking into account all of these expenses as well as any maintenance or repair costs that may arise in the future. For example, Howard suggests that if you earn $5,000 per month before taxes, your total monthly mortgage payment should not exceed $1,400 or 28% of that total. Now, if your mortgage payment is higher than this amount, he recommends that you consider finding a less expensive home or waiting until you've saved up a larger down payment to reduce your monthly payment. And now, when it comes to buying a new car, what's a reasonable amount to borrow? Well, in the book, Your Money, The Missing Manual, J.D. Roth recommends that you should keep your auto loan debt to a minimum and aim to pay cash for your vehicles whenever possible. Even so, if you do need to take out an auto loan, Roth suggests limiting your monthly car payments to more than 10% of your take-home pay. That's because Roth believes that taking on too much auto loan debt can be a financial burden and limit your ability to achieve other financial goals, such as saving for retirement or for emergencies. He also suggests that you should choose a used car instead of a new car, as they often are more affordable and can provide a good value for your money. And finally, Roth recommends that you should shop around for the best auto loan rates and terms before actually making a purchase, and suggests that you should avoid dealer financing and consider getting pre-approved for an auto loan from a credit union or bank before you start shopping. Now, when it comes to credit cards, government data shows that the average American carries a balance of at least $1,000 on their credit cards. That's why in her best-selling personal finance book, The Money Class, How to Stand in Your Truth and Create the Future You Deserve, Susie Orman recommends that you aim to keep your credit card debt to no more than 30% of your available credit limit. What's more, Susie argues that you should aim to pay off your credit card balances in full each month to avoid high interest charges and long-term debt. And in fact, in her book, Susie goes on to explain that carrying a balance in your credit cards can be costly and interest charges can add up quickly over time. That's why it's important to make prudent use of this tool. And finally, when it comes to student loan debt, the big question here is how much should you aim to borrow for yourself or for your children? Well, in the book, Making the Most of Your Money Now, Jane Bryant Quinn recommends that you should limit your total student loan debt to no more than your expected annual salary after graduation. This means that if you expect to earn $40,000 per year after graduation, you should aim to limit your total student loan debt to $40,000 or less. Now, Quinn emphasized the importance of minimizing student loan debt as much as possible by exploring alternatives such as grants and scholarships and work-study programs, or by supplementing your debt payoff with a part-time job. Quinn also suggests that you should look at less expensive colleges or universities or attend a community college before transferring to a 4-year institution and take advantage of programs that allow you to earn credit while still in high school. Now, as we mentioned earlier, being able to stick to a disciplined use of credit can help you avoid running afoul of common borrowing issues. That's because when your borrowing gets out of hand, it could lead to unfavorable situations that limit your optionality and creates missed opportunities and creates more emotional stress and anxiety in your life. Now remember, when used wisely, credit can help you fast track your path to financial independence by acting as a force multiplier to boost your earnings ability, provide you with leverage you need to acquire appreciable assets, and keep you solvent in times of emergency. Even so, taking on too much debt can limit your ability to jump on financial opportunities that may come your way. And how is that? Well, let me tell you about Frank's story. Now, Frank is an entrepreneur who used his stellar credit to borrow money to start his business. Even so, one afternoon, Frank found himself sitting at the kitchen table, sifting through a pile of bills that he'd accumulated from his startup. Now, Frank had always been a responsible person, but a series of unexpected events with his startup had left him struggling to keep up with his financial obligations. And a few weeks ago, a close friend approached Frank with a promising business opportunity. Now, they needed a partner to help expand their thriving local storefront into a chain of stores, and they believed that Frank had the skills and the expertise to make it a success. The potential for lucrative returns was undeniable, but the required initial investment was substantial. Now, Frank spent countless nights analyzing the opportunity and dreaming of the financial freedom it could bring him and his family. This opportunity could be his ticket out of debt and a way to secure a comfortable future. But as he sat down and created a detailed plan, he realized that his current debt situation made it impossible to take on additional financial risk. That's because his mortgage and his car loans and credit card balances had snowballed into a mountain of debt that was suffocating his finances. The monthly payments were barely manageable, and he knew that adding another significant obligation could easily push him into a downward spiral. Now, Frank hesitated for days, trying to figure out how to make it work. He considered taking on a second job, or selling some of its assets, or even taking a loan from a family member. But deep down, he knew that none of these options would be enough to keep his head above water if the venture didn't go as planned. So with a heavy heart, Frank picked up his phone to tell his friends that he couldn't join them in this business venture. He could hear the disappointment in their voices, but they understood his situation and they wished him well. And now, as he sat at the kitchen table, he knew that it was time to face his financial reality head on. He would need to develop a plan to tackle his debt, cut back on his expenses, and work towards a more secure financial future. And this missed opportunity served as a reminder of the importance of managing finances responsibly and staying on top of obligations. And though the thought of what could have been stung Frank, he understood that he had to focus on overcoming his current challenges before he could chase new opportunities. And it was at that point that he was determined to learn from his experience and ensure that next time an incredible opportunity came knocking, that he be ready to answer the door. Now, certainly taking on too much debt may limit your choices when lucrative financial opportunities come your way. What's more, while credit can act as a lifeline for one-off big-ticket purchases, borrowing too much money can leave you financially fragile and unable to bounce back if you get hit with another unexpected life event. And that's exactly what happened to Maria. Now, Maria had always been prudent with her money, living frugally and saving for the future. Even so, she couldn't have anticipated the series of events that would unfold and leave her in a financially fragile position. Now, a few years ago, she decided to take the plunge and purchase her dream home. It had a picturesque view with a spacious backyard for her growing family. And Maria borrowed to the hilt. She took out a sizable mortgage that was at the top end of her budget, but with her steady income and careful budgeting, she felt confident that she could manage the monthly payments. Now, life carried on smoothly for a while, and Maria made consistent progress towards paying down her mortgage. However, unforeseen challenges began to rise up. Her partner lost their job due to company downsizing, and although they were actively searching for a new position, it took months for them to secure another job, leading them to burn through their emergency savings because her partner's unemployment benefits weren't enough to cover their share of the household expenses, leaving Maria to shoulder the burden alone. Now, to make matters worse, she was hit with an unexpected medical emergency that required surgery and a lengthy recovery. And while her insurance covered most of the cost, she was still left with significant out-of-pocket expenses. This event also forced her to take an extended leave from her job, which impacted her income further as her long-term disability only covered a portion of her regular income. And to stay afloat, Maria reluctantly turned to credit cards to cover the mounting expenses, but soon the minimum payments on her credit card balances began to pile up, adding to her already strained budget. And just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, a leak in her home's roof led to water damage and costly repairs. Now desperate to address the issues before it worsened, she took out a home equity line of credit, hoping to pay it off at once her financial situation improved. Unfortunately, the combined weight of the mortgage and credit card debt and home equity line of credit left Maria struggling to keep her head above water. With each passing month, she found it harder to make ends meet, and the stress began taking a toll on her physical and mental well-being. Maria never imagined that her pursuit of a dream home could lead her to such a financially fragile position. But the combination of unforeseen challenges and mounting debt became an overwhelming burden. Nevertheless, this was her rock bottom moment, and now Maria is focused on finding a way to overcome this difficult situation and regain control over her financial future. The takeaway here is that while credit can be helpful, too much of a good thing can act like kryptonite, holding you back from potential opportunities or leave you financially fragile if you overstretch your borrowing budget. That's why it's crucial to understand that debt isn't always the enemy when you're working towards your financial future. Indeed, if used wisely, credit can be a superpower, amplifying your future earnings potential, providing leverage to purchase valuable assets, and offering a safety net during those tough times. Even so, it's vital to remember to remain true to your core values and the purpose that you've assigned for your money. Be introspective and ask yourself whether a debt-related purchase aligns with your financial goals or if it's merely catering to someone else's expectations. And this mindfulness will help you avoid overconsumption and ensure your credit is working for you and not against you. And finally, think of managing your credit as an essential skill, much like spending and saving judiciously. That's because overwhelming debt can lead to lost opportunities and financial fragility in the face of life's unpredictable events. Even so, by adopting a balanced approach, you're well on your way to crafting a stable, prosperous future, one in which you're moving one step closer to becoming the master of your own financial independence journey. Well, that's it for now. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the FI Mastery podcast. To learn more about our research, visit us at fimastery.com or email your questions to questions@franklinmadisonadvisors.com. Until next time, I'm Peter Donisanu, wishing you and yours abundant health and prosperity.
FI Mastery Podcast is brought to you by Franklin Madison Advisors, Inc. Franklin Madison Advisors is a registered investment advisor firm with its registration and principal place of business in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skills or training. This commentary and forecasts are limited to the dissemination of general information pertaining to Franklin Madison Advisors' investment advisory services and general economic and market conditions and are subject to change without notice. The information shared today is not intended to be personal, legal, investment, or tax advice, or a solicitation to buy or sell any security or engage in a particular investment strategy. For additional information about Franklin Madison Advisors, including fees and services, please contact Franklin Madison Advisors or refer to the Investment Advisor public disclosures.